A few years ago, I reached a breaking point. Life had become a relentless downward spiral, a suffocating cycle I couldn't escape. My bank account was a graveyard of overdraft fees and unpaid bills, my mind a battlefield where anxiety and despair waged a ceaseless war. The city I'd called home for over a decade, a place once brimming with promise, had morphed into something unrecognizable, a festering wound on the landscape. I lived in a cramped fifth-floor apartment, the walls thin enough to let every sound bleed through. The wail of sirens, the shouts of arguments spilling onto the street, the endless rumble of traffic that never slept. Sleep eluded me too sometimes. For weeks at a time, I'd lie awake, eyes burning, as the headlights of passing cars slashed across my ceiling like the strokes of a frantic painter. Stepping outside only deepened the sense of decay. The streets were a gallery of suffering. Homeless encampments sprawled beneath overpasses, their occupants shivering under tattered blankets. Needles and cracked pipes glinted in the gutters like discarded treasures. Muggings and overdoses unfolded in broad daylight, met with the indifferent shrugs of onlookers. I'd seen a man collapse once, foam bubbling at his lips, his eyes rolling, back as a crowd stepped around him, too numb or too hurried to care. The city had become a wasteland, a concrete jungle where hope had long since withered. I felt it eroding me to a slow death of the soul, each day chipping away at whatever resilience I had left. I had no anchors to keep me there, no girlfriend to share quiet evenings with, no wife to build a future alongside, no children to give me purpose. My parents had passed years earlier, my father to cancer, my mother to a broken heart not long after, and their absence left a hollow ache I couldn't fill. My siblings and I had drifted apart, our conversations reduced to perfunctory holiday texts, if that. Friends? They'd faded too, swallowed by their own struggles or the city's relentless grind. I was untethered, a ghost haunting my own life, and I knew I couldn't stay. The decision crystallized one sleepless night as I stood on my balcony, the air thick with exhaust and desperation. I had to leave, or I die here. Piece by piece. So I sold everything. The furniture went first, cheap IKEA pieces that fetched pennies on Craigslist. My TV, my laptop, my collection of vinyl records, all traded for cash to fund my exodus. I kept only what fit in my beat-up sedan, a duffel bag of clothes, a box of books, a few photos of my parents I couldn't bear to part with. The car groaned under the weight of my meager possessions as I pointed it north, the city shrinking in my rearview mirror like a bad dream fading at dawn. My destination? Alaska. It wasn't a plan so much as an instinct to pull toward something. Vast and wild, a place where I could outrun the chaos I'd known. The drive took days, each mile a shedding of the old me. I crossed state lines, watched plains give way to mountains, felt the air grow crisper as I climbed toward the last frontier. When I arrived, I found a realtor in a small town, a grizzled woman with a smoker's rasp, and handed over most of my savings for a cabin and a plot of land. It sat in the shadow of towering peaks, surrounded by dark, enchanting forests that stretched into infinity. The cabin itself was modest, weathered logs, a single room with a loft, a wood stove in the corner. But it was mine, a foothold in a world that felt untouched by the rot I'd fled. The first weeks were a revelation. I learned to chop wood, my hands blistering as I swung the axe, the satisfying crack of splitting logs a rhythm I could lose myself in. I bought a rifle and a shotgun, taught myself to hunt clumsily at first, missing more deer than I hit, but eventually bringing home meat to stew over the fire. In the backyard, I carved out a small garden, planting potatoes and carrots in the brief summer, trusting the earth to sustain me. A solar panel scavenged from a hardware store in town powered a single bulb and a hot plate enough to keep me from total darkness. I strung a hammock between two posts on the porch, a perch where I'd sit for hours, staring at the landscape that unfolded before me. That view, it was everything I'd dreamed of. White-capped mountains loomed like silent giants, their peaks piercing the sky. Thick clusters of evergreens stood sentinel, their branches heavy with needles that whispered in the wind. In winter, a virgin blanket of snow draped the world, transforming it into a glittering wonderland that caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 directions. There were no houses in sight, no roads carving scars across the earth, no horns blaring, or engines roaring. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk or the rustle of some unseen creature in the underbrush. I'd close my eyes, breathe in the sharp, clean air free of smog and sorrow, and feel, for the first time in years, a flicker of peace. One afternoon, as autumn bled into winter, I lay in that hammock, a wool blanket draped over me. The sun hung low, casting golden rays across the valley. I watched it sink, the sky igniting in streaks of orange and crimson, the fading light smearing like blood across the horizon. A mug of instant coffee warmed my hands, its bitter steam curling into the chill. I sipped it slowly, letting the warmth seep into my bones, and felt my eyelids grow heavy. The world blurred, the mountains softening into shadows, and I drifted. Off my first real sleep in months, untroubled by nightmares or the city's restless pulse, I woke hours later, groggy, as the last embers of daylight slipped behind the peaks. The air had turned frigid, my breath puffing in white clouds. I stumbled inside, joints stiff, and fumbled with the hot plate to make another cup of coffee. As it brewed, I wandered the cabin, restless, searching for something to occupy the quiet evening. The previous owner had left behind a bookshelf, its warped planks sagging under the weight of dog-eared paperbacks Philip K. Dick, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein. I'd meant to sort through them, but inertia had kept them untouched. Now bored, I ran my fingers along the spines, their titles, promising escape into distant worlds. But the peace I'd felt outside began to fray, a subtle unease creeping in, though I couldn't name its source. That night, as I lay in the loft under a pile of quilts, the cabin creaked around me settling wood. I told myself, though the sound felt too deliberate, too alive. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and I imagined the bears, moose, and wolves that roamed the wilderness beyond my door. I'd seen their tracks, heard their calls. They were a constant reminder of my vulnerability. My rifle leaned against the wall, a silent guardian, but it didn't ease the growing weight in my chest. The move had given me space, yes, a reprieve from the city's suffocation, but the roots of my misery hadn't been uprooted. They'd traveled with me. Thousands of miles, sinking deeper into this endless wilderness. Days turned to weeks, then months. The northern lights became my companions, their cosmic waves of green and purple shimmering through the long winter nights like a divine promise. I'd stand outside, neck craned, watching them dance, feeling small yet alive beneath their glow. But even that beauty couldn't silence the truth I'd begun to face. Wherever I went, there I was. The cabin, the mountains, the solitude they'd offered a mirror, not a cure. My finances might stabilize, my hands might grow calloused and capable, but the restlessness, the hollow ache, the sleepless nights they lingered, shadows I couldn't outrun. One morning, as I trudged through fresh snow to check my garden now, buried under drifts I stopped, shotgun slung over my shoulder, and looked back at the cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney, a thin gray thread against the white expanse. It was beautiful, this life I'd carved out, but it wasn't enough. The wilderness had given me a new stage, not a new script. I'd fled the city thinking it was the source of my pain, but I'd brought the real wreckage with me, myself. And as the wind whipped past, carrying the distant howl of a wolf, I wondered how long I could keep running from that truth, or if, here at the edge of the world, I'd finally have to confront it. When I first moved into the cabin, it felt like stepping into a dream, a quiet refuge carved from Alaska's wild heart. The single-room structure, its logs weathered by decades of harsh winters, sat alone amid towering evergreens and jagged peaks. I'd come here to escape, to leave behind a city that had chewed me up and spit me out, and for a while, the solitude was a salve. I spent my days building a new rhythm, hunting with my rifle, tending a small garden, watching the northern lights ripple across the sky like God's own brushstrokes. The simplicity steadied me, gave me something to hold on to. But the past has a way of clinging, and well, it wasn't long before I stumbled across something that cracked that fragile piece wide open. A tea happened one gray afternoon in late winter, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, promising snow. I was restless, the silence of the cabin pressing in after days of being snowed in. The solar panel kept the lights flickering, but I craved distraction. The previous owner had left behind a bookshelf, a sagging, dusty thing crammed with sci-fi paperbacks. Philip K. Dick, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, their names promised escape into worlds far stranger than my own. I'd ignored the collection until then, too busy settling in, but boredom drove me to it. I rifled through the titles, a maze of death. UBIK, my fingers brushing over cracked spines, when something caught my eye. A black leather-bound book, no title, no author, its cover faded to a dull sheen, worn smooth by time and touch. Curiosity tugged at me. I slid it free, the leather cool against my palm, and opened it. Inside, neat cursive flowed across the pages in a copperplate script, precise and elegant, like it belonged to another era. It was a diary, left behind by the cabin's last owner. The first entry was dated January 9th, 2015, and as I read, the warmth of the wood stove faded, replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with the storm brewing outside. I don't know if I'm going crazy or not, it began. I went into town to talk to my therapist yesterday, and she said I should try writing everything down. She talks to me like it's all in my head, but I know it's not. The writer unnamed at first described moving into the cabin, calling it paradise. A sanctuary from a life he didn't detail, but hinted at with bitter asides. Then the tone shifted. Something had started haunting him. At night, he'd hear shuffling beneath his bed, faint at first, like a rat skittering across the floorboards, then louder, ragged with breathing, as if a corpse with dirt in its lungs had clawed its way back to life. He'd catch glimpses of it in the dark, a figure, naked and emaciated, its skin hanging loose, almost sloughing off the bone, its eyes rotted black pits, its spine twisted into a grotesque arc. It moved jerkily, limbs bending wrong, but vanished whenever he tried to confront it, lights on, camera raised, leaving only a cloying, sweet stench like a spreading infection. I paused, my coffee gone cold in my hand. The cabin creaked. Around me, the wind rattling the windows, and I glanced at the shadowed corners, half expecting to see something slink into view. I shook it off imagination, nothing more, and kept reading. The entries grew frantic. He was snowed in, trapped with this thing, a prisoner in his own haven. Mounds of snow, 5 feet high, buried the cabin, cutting him off from town. His wife, he wrote, claimed she saw nothing, heard nothing, but then she'd vanish once in the middle of a blizzard, gone for hours, only to reappear at dawn with no memory of leaving. "There's no way she went into town," he scrawled. The trails were impassable. "Something's going on here, but I don't know what it is. I'm really scared for our lives." That was enough. I slammed the diary shut, heart thudding, and shoved it back onto the shelf as if it might burn me. I didn't want to know more, didn't want to catch whatever madness had infected him. Cabin fever, I told myself. Isolation does strange things to a mind. I grabbed a maze of death instead, hoping Dick's surreal twists would drown out the image of that twisted man crawling through the dark. I read late into the night, the stove's glow my only company, but the words blurred. Every creak of the cabin, every gust against the walls, became the thing shuffling, breathing, watching. I fought sleep, but exhaustion won, and as my eyes fluttered shut, I swore I saw a silhouette at the window, gaunt, hunched, its long fingers pressed to the glass, black eyes boring into me. I jolted upright, breath hitching, and stared out into the snow-draped night. Nothing. Just the wind sculpting drifts into eerie shapes. Morning came, brittle and cold. I needed air, needed to shake the diary's grip on me. I strapped on snowshoes, grabbed my shotgun. Bears and wolves were real threats out here, not hallucinations, and stepped outside. The world sparkled under a fresh layer of snow, pristine and silent, but then I saw them, footprints circling the cabin, deep and deliberate, too large for a fox or deer. My pulse quickened. I traced them, shotgun ready, expecting they'd lead to the window where I'd seen that shape. They didn't. They veered off, 20 feet away, down the hill toward the frozen lake, a quarter-mile off. Relief hit me then I spotted a figure, black against the white expanse, moving slowly across the ice. "Steve," I shouted, recognizing my nearest neighbor, a mile away in his own cabin. He jumped, his rifle snapping up, then relaxed when he saw me, waving a gloved hand. "Hey, Josh. Surprised to see you up this early." His voice carried, muted by the snow's strange acoustics. "Been having trouble sleeping," I called back, slinging my shotgun over my shoulder as I crunched toward him. "What are you doing out here?" "Hunting," he said with a sly wink. "Animals are most active at dusk and dawn. Best luck then." He squinted at me, his weathered face creasing. "You look rough, though. Those bags under your eyes could carry groceries," I forced a laugh. "Trust me, I know." Hesitating, I added, "Hey, this might sound weird, but did you know the guy who owned my cabin before me?" Steve's expression shifted, his easy grin vanished, replaced by a guarded scowl. Sure. We met. His eyes searched mine like he was digging for something, but he didn't offer more. The sudden wall between us threw me off balance. Is he still around? I pressed, voice steady despite the unease coiling in my gut. His scowl deepened, and he pointed at my cabin, a dark shape against the hill. "Buddy, I don't know what this is about, but he's dead. Dead. Died in that cabin, actually." His words landed like a punch, cold and final. My stomach lurched, dread seeping through me like ice water. How did he die?" I stammered. "Heart attack or something." Steve's gaze dropped, avoiding mine. "Alaska's got the highest missing persons rate in the country, you know that? Way more than anywhere else, population-wise. They call it the Alaska Triangle. We're smack in the middle of it," he sighed, heavy and slow, meeting my eyes again. "Look, what happened to him and his wife. It's disturbing. If you really want to know, I'll tell you, but it ain't gonna help you sleep." "I want to know," I said, too quick, too firm, the diary's words clawing at me. He nodded, reluctant. "Let's go back to your place then." I could use a whiskey to warm up. We trudged back, the wind picking up, flinging snow sideways, in sharp gusts. Inside, I poured 2 shots of Johnny Walker from a bottle I'd barely touched. Steve downed 3 in a minute, hissing as the burn hit, while I sipped half of mine, the glass clinking back onto the coffee table. He leaned back, a spark in his eyes now. "So, you want to know about Will Lenning?" "Well, I'll tell you, no one really knows the whole story. He'd been a regular guy," Steve said, "like me, a city escapee chasing peace. For a couple months, everything seemed fine. They'd ski, shoot, drink beers with other hunters, play poker now and then. Never saw anything odd about Will," Steve said, staring out the window at the mountains. "Never could have predicted what happened." He paused, voice dropping. Then he started talking about someone peering in his windows at night, hearing sounds under his bed, sick breathing, shuffling. Kept every light on, all the time. Started losing it, digging holes all over, even in snowstorms. Classic cabin fever, my throat tightened. The diary flashed in my mind, those exact details, scrawled in that meticulous hand. I glanced at the bookshelf, its black spine glinting. Like a coiled snake, a few weeks later, Steve went on. I came by, worried I hadn't heard from him. Door was wide open. Found him in that chair. He pointed to where I sat, shotgun at his feet, hole through his skull. Blood-stained diary next to him, open to the last page. Said something like, "I see now what's going on. The twisted. Man is leading me to the truth. Today, I'll finally find it." His suicide note. I froze, the room tilting. "And his wife?" "Missing," Steve said, grim. "Around the same time. Cops thought she split, but..." He shook his head. "Never seen again. Like she evaporated." He left soon after, muttering about the storm picking up. I sat there, whiskey sour in my stomach, and pulled the diary back out. Flipping to the middle, I found it January 27th, 2015, blood spattered. "I see now what's going on." Will Lenning's last words. He hadn't lasted long after the twisted man appeared. I stared out at the darkening sky, the cabin's walls closing in. If the police took it as evidence, how was it here? And what if I was next? 3 months into my Alaskan exile, the cabin had become both sanctuary and cage. I'd fled the city's decay for this remote haven, its snow-draped mountains, whispering evergreens, and star-strewn skies, but peace remained elusive. The solitude sharpened my edges rather than smoothing them, and the wilderness, for all its beauty, held a quiet menace. Bear tracks near the garden, wolf howls slicing through the night. I kept my shotgun close, a talisman against the unknown, but it couldn't ward off the unease that had taken root since I'd found Will Lenning's diary. Its tales of a twisted man stalking the cabin had burrowed into my mind, sprouting nightmares I couldn't shake. That night, I sought distraction in the cabin's lone luxury, a small TV hooked to a satellite dish, powered by my solar panel. Reception was spotty, but it worked enough to fill the silence with mindless noise. I rarely used it. The solar energy was better spent on cooking or heating bath water. But tonight, with the wind shrieking outside and the diary's shadow lingering, I needed its light, its chatter, its illusion of company. I flipped through channels, old sitcoms, grainy weather reports settling on a rerun of some laugh-track comedy. The canned laughter felt hollow, but it was a lifeline. I sank into the armchair, a beer in hand, letting the flickering screen lull me. The bottle emptied, my grip slackened, and sleep took me, heavy and dreamless. I jolted awake to static. The TV hissed, a sea of white noise spitting from the speakers, the screen a chaotic dance of black and gray. I blinked, disoriented, the room dark save for the stove's dying embers. The clock glowed red. 3:33 m. My heart thudded something. Had woken me, sharp and sudden, but the cabin was still. The wind's howl, the only sound beyond the TV's gurgle. I rubbed my eyes, reaching for the remote, when the static deepened, a low rumble threading through it. Words, faint and garbled, seemed to rise from the noise, slow, diseased breathing, like a drowning man's last gasp. I froze, straining. To hear, as black lines traced horizontally across the screen, resolving into an image.it, was my cabin. A live feed, grainy but unmistakable. The armchair, the stove, the bookshelf, and me leaning forward, staring at the TV, just as I was now. My breath caught. I raised my hand, testing, and the tiny me on screen mirrored it. Ice flooded my veins, dread coiling tight. What the hell is this? I whispered, glancing to the ceiling where a camera should be just rough-hewn logs. No wires, no lens. I turned back, and my scream lodged in my throat. A figure stood behind my on-screen self, pale, naked, emaciated, its spine twisted into a grotesque curve. It rose jerkily, broken limbs shivering, and a voice rasped from the speakers, thick with rot. He is a killer, the shadow of death. Many have fallen. Many lie buried across this forest. You will be next. He is watching you. Long, blackened fingers reached for my shoulders. I leapt up, the beer bottle shattering on the floor, and spun around. Nothing, just the empty chair, the dark room. In my panic, I backed into the TV, sending it crashing down in a burst of glass and sparks. Darkness swallowed me, but for a split second, I thought I glimpsed a sunken face, rotted eyes, a lipless grin peering from behind the chair. I scrambled for the lights, flipping every switch, flooding the cabin with a harsh glow. No one, no thing. Just the wrecked TV, its screen a spiderweb of cracks, and the echo of that voice in my skull. I stood there, panting, shotgun in hand, scanning every shadow. If it wanted me dead, why hadn't it struck while I slept? Nothing made sense. I couldn't stay. The warning, real or hallucination, lit a fuse. I threw on layers, snow pants, sweaters, a heavy coat, gloves, scarf, anything, to shield me from the 30-wind chill. The night was clear, no storm to trap me, but the cold was a blade waiting to cut. Alaska's missing persons rate flashed through my mind, Steve's words about the Alaska Triangle, bodies lost to snow and silence. I grabbed my shotgun, stuffed a backpack with essentials, and fired up the snowmobile. Steve's cabin, a mile away, was my only refuge. I'd wait there till dawn, then figure out my next move town. Maybe, or anywhere but here, the trail wound through evergreens, their branches clawing at me as I sped along, engine roaring. The headlight carved a tunnel through the dark, but I felt eyes, hundreds, thousands watching from the trees. Twice, I glimpsed a pale figure in the snow, motionless, gone when I looked again. My pulse hammered, the cold biting through my layers, but relief surged when Steve's cabin appeared, lights twinkling, smoke curling from the chimney. I cut the engine, boots crunching on snow, and noticed two sets of footprints, one large, one small, leading to his door. Odd, but I brushed it off. Steve lived alone, didn't he? I knocked hard, breath fogging. He answered, groggy, half-dressed, his gray hair wild. Josh, he mumbled, blinking. What's going on? Steve, I need a favor, I said, voice shaking. Something weird's happening at my place. Can I stay till morning? I just can't be there tonight. He yawned, nodding. Couch is yours. Put that shotgun somewhere safe, though. He waved me in, shuffling back to his bedroom, a partitioned space off the main room, and slammed the door. His cabin was bigger than mine, a joint kitchen living area, a bathroom, a worn couch in the corner. I set the shotgun by the couch, but couldn't sit. Sleep was impossible. I paced restless, and my eyes drifted to his bookshelf crowded with tattered paperbacks, a stark contrast to my sci-fi stash. End roll, true crime. Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer. A chill prickled my neck. At the end sat a thick, unlabeled black binder, its edges frayed, eerily like Will's diary, curiosity damnable, relentless pulled me to it. I slid it free, heart thudding, and opened it. News clippings spilled across the pages, yellowed and brittle. The first, from 20 years back, detailed a hiker vanishing in these woods, body never found, family pleading for leads. Page after page followed, missing women, murdered prostitutes, lost hunters, no suspects. I flipped faster, breath shallow, until I hit Willenning's suicide shotgun to the head, right where I'd sat. Next to it, in red marker, Steve had scrawled haha, then his wife's disappearance. No trace, no closure. My hands trembled as I stared at the binder. A catalog of horrors, a click sharp, metallic froze me. How do you like my work, friend? Steve's voice, jovial and mocking, slithered from behind. I turned, binder clutched tight, to see him in the bedroom doorway, pistol aimed at my chest. His grin stretched wide, but his blue eyes were dead, cold as the ice outside. It's you, I rasped, reality buckling. You killed Will, his wife. All these people, she was cheating on him with me. He hissed, venom dripping. They always get what's coming. Too bad I just killed another tonight. Was saving you for later. It comes in waves. You see the urge. He laughed, a jagged sound, and I saw it then. A pale, hunched figure behind him. The twisted man, its jerky. Movements silent, its rotted eyes fixed on Steve. You need help, I whispered, stalling, edging toward the couch. Help? He sneered. They'd give me a needle in the arm. That's why you cover your tracks. The twisted man slid a broken finger across Steve's neck. He yelped, spinning, and I lunged for my shotgun. 2 shots rang out his pistol. One splintered. The ceiling, raining wood. The second tore into my leg, a searing explosion of pain. I screamed, fury overtaking fear, and fired. The slug ripped through Steve's head, his forehead caving in, blood and bone spraying the wall. He crumpled, lifeless. I sank, clutching my leg, blood pooling warm and sticky. The twisted man loomed, grinning, then slinked into the shadows and vanished. Panting, I pieced it together, the TV's warning. He is a killer. You will be next. He is watching you, not me. Steve. It had tried to warn Will, too, and failed. I bandaged my leg with gauze from Steve's bathroom, poured alcohol on the wound, screaming as it burned, then swallowed painkillers with a beer. Dawn crept in, pale and weak. I limped to the snowmobile, glancing back. In the doorway, the twisted man waved, jerky and slow. I waved back, started the engine, and rode toward town, leaving a trail of blood and revelation behind.